All right, everybody, we are here at the Ellison Air Park aboard the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and I am pleased and honored to be joined by my longtime good friend, Tomcat, Top Gun icon, Heatley. Heater, it's really good to see you.
Hey, Mooch. Really glad to be here.
So we tried to do this, a year and a half ago and had, let's just call it, some technical issues. But I'm glad we could circle back. You're a busy man. And we saw each other at the Ocean Air Show a few weeks ago in passing. So generally, the first thing my audience wants to know is, how did you get your call sign?
Heater is a fastball in baseball, and I played a lot of baseball, undefeated in 4 years in Legion ball. So really good fastball in Pennsylvania. And they all called me Heater, and that kind of carried over.
So what college did you go to?
I went to your mother's college. One of the scouts that was scouting me in Pennsylvania said, if you don't get drafted, go to college. Even if you get drafted but late, go to college. And he said, Mizzou's got a great baseball coach, and he'll get you in the College World Series, and he'll be better than single A ball. That's how he came to end up at the same school your mom went to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I had forgotten that. So you're an AOCS accession?
No, I went.
You were a ROTC at Mizzou.
I signed up for ROTC at Mizzou, and after the first year, they gave me a four-year scholarship.
So you get your wings, as you've already described. You go to the F-4 rag at Oceana. So you started flying F-4s.
The F-101, F-4s, basically 1973-ish. Finally on my first real fighter after T2s and A4s. Really good experience. And BF-74 made back-to-back cruises. So unlike a lot of people, I got well over 1,000 hours and well over 350 traps my very first tour.
So that was your first sea tour?
Right.
The F-74 B Devilers. What boat were you guys on?
We started on the Forrestal, went over, did a whole med cruise, 7 months, came back. It was almost like cross-decking. The Nimitz was going out. We didn't even get out of carrier qual. So we had a little bit of a break, turned around, and went back over on the Nimitz, this time with a Marine sister squadron instead of the F-11. So Nimitz, second med cruise, you go from being the dumb nugget to all of a sudden you're a flight lead. Was
it between cruises or after your second cruise that you were selected to go to Top Gun? And what was that process all about? Because it was a little bit unorthodox.
Yeah, in VF-74, the skipper, he had an idea that he would fight every single JO in his squadron. And there were 5 of us lieutenants. So we thought he would pick the best one to go to Top Gun.
The one that could beat him, or the one that
one that could beat him
longest before getting
shot?
So
all 5 of us went up and fought 2 to 3 engagements each. And my first engagement went real quick. I got him. He tried something he thought would fool me, and he was dead really fast. The second engagement took a little longer, and I got him. And then the third engagement, we both pulled our guts out, and I went 2-circle and just kept pulling, lost him. The G's went down, and I lost him. And so I'm trying to figure out my essay. All right, where was he? Where would he be with the last airspeed and G I saw? And I couldn't find him, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, there goes Top Gun, and boom, there's his tailpipes. 3/4 of a mile in front of me. And I just go, Fox 2 on the F4 heading 270. And that was it. So I think, all right, I'm in. That's 3 engagements. Well, it turns out another guy was an LSO, pretty good stick, but he didn't want to lose the LSO. The other guys, he shot him up. And one guy, he shot every single time. So he picked that guy to go to Top Gun. I was kind of, upset because I thought, man, Top Gun sounds like where I need to be. Lo and behold, the Rios of all of those pilots got together and they went to the skipper and they said, Skipper, Top Gun's supposed to be the best of the best. You're not supposed to send the worst guy to get training. And he said, yeah, but he needs it the most. That guy needs the training the most. And they said, no, you don't understand.
Yeah,
the
you're
Top
missing
Gun.
the point.
Yeah, you're missing the point. He's got to go there, get to a next level, and then come back and share with us everything and be our instructor. And so he relented, changed his mind. I got to go in 1975. When I got there, I realized, man, this is me. This is where I want to be. Good enough was never good enough. There were always relentless pursuit of perfection. And the standard was just so high, way above anything I'd seen in the fleet to that point. I was just in heaven. It was 5 weeks of heaven. 1 or 2 flights a day, every day. And there were only 2 sections in our class, one of the smallest classes ever, because it was in December.
So you get back to the F-74, and now you're the de facto training officer.
Right.
And so your
Right.
job, as you've already said, is to raise the bar
Yeah.
of excellence of a fleet squadron.
Now, as you know, completely different. So instead of going midway through your cruise, or tour rather, and then you spend a year and a half teaching everybody everything you learned, now they wait till the end of your tour. Then you go to Top Gun, and then you get orders somewhere else. Much longer syllabus now, too. We only had 5 weeks. They have 13 weeks now.
Yeah, they rethought the whole concept of the strike fighter weapons training instructor, Swifty, as a way to standardize. I think what they found in the old model was it was uneven in terms of people getting back and
Right.
the level of training they'd actually be able to conduct. Now it's time just to get right to your shore tour. It's time to get orders, and you wind up getting orders back to Top Gun
Right, as an instructor.
as an instructor.
So that's a pretty happy day.
So you're still F4 guy, right? You go out there, you're flying. What were you flying at the time? The A4? Did you guys have F5s? What were the aggressor airplanes that you guys were using?
You got called right away in the A4, the T-38, and the F5.
And also you get a program to be the lecturer about. What was your subject matter expertise?
I did AAA, briefing and debriefing, and 1v1, and also maybe almost a year after I got there, I ended up being the MiG pilot from Area 51. So each class would go to Nellis and then fight me in the 17 or the 21.
So let's double click on that detail. I've done an episode called The Secret Program Behind a Secret Program that's a pretty popular episode, so perhaps folks have seen that. So you're talking about, and make sure I got the classified label right, Constant Peg, or is this Half Blue? Was this part of Constant Peg?
No, they hadn't even
It was
thought
before
about
that was a thing.
Before
Okay.
Constant Peg was a thing.
Okay.
These were Air Force System Command airplanes in a whole different program, like Have Idea, Have Donut. And we just used those airplanes to expose the Top Gun class to them.
So MiG-17s, MiG-19s, is that what you said you had in the inventory?
21s and 17s.
Okay, 21 17s. And you're flying out of, you said Area 51. What field? Is that Tonopah or Grooms Lake, or are you authorized to say?
It's you can say now.
It's not classified anymore.
Back then, it was the box that nobody could enter, and you'd get forced down if you did, and sent home, and someone else would have to get your airplane out of Red Flag, because Red Flag was all around there. But you couldn't go in the box. Couldn't go in Groom Lake, Area 51. But that's where the MiGs were, and that's where we flew out of. So the Top Gun guys were authorized to come right overhead our field and fight.
Okay.
And that's where we fought.
Now, how did you get there? Would you take a commuter plane from Nellis to Grooms Lake, or a bus, or how did you get out there?
That was the greatest part. I either took a T-38, an F-5, sometimes an F-4, and sometimes, every now and then, you'd get on a commuter plane, like some of the other people that worked there. So A lot of times I'd fly in on one airplane, fly out on another, fly 3-4 times that day, plus the 2 transit hops. So for a few days there, I was getting 6-7 hops a day, every day.
So what were your impressions of the Soviet airplanes that you were flying relative to either the F-4 or any of the aggressors that you'd flown? What was your takeaway?
It turns out the F-5 is a very good simulator for the MiG-21, so that was nice to know. And I think if I had to fight me as a clone, and I'm in the F-5 and my clone's in the MiG-21, I can beat the 21 in an energy fight. But if we get slow and it's a knife fight and it's nose authority at slow speeds, the MiG-21 has an advantage there. Energy fight, F-5 wins. Rate fight, the 21 wins. The 17, I love the 17 because it turned like a racquetball off a wall. I mean, it impressed everyone that flew against it. If you got that to about 400 knots, you couldn't even pull the max G because it was all manual. So it basically took all your bicep strength to put G's on it, and you could feel the stick almost bending when you're at high speeds. But when you get it down, as you start bleeding down from 400 and you get to 350, at 350 there's not as much air pressure that your biceps has to work against. So at 350 you can pull 7.5 G's, and that's when the airplane, imagine an airplane at 350 doing 7.5, boing. The A4 was a pretty good simulator in size, but not nearly like the 21 and the F5. But the turn rate was okay. It didn't have that racquetball bounce, but the A4 did a good job simulating the 17. And the 17 and the 21, the other thing about it is they both smelled like they had an electrical fire during a hydraulic leak all the time. I mean, as soon as you get in there, it's like, oh my goodness. I mean, these are old airplanes, and they were relics from all over the world. We even got some off of a stand like this. They were on a stick out in front of a base. And we brought 22 MiGs in from all over the world, and our maintainers, who had long hair, long beards, and were basically undercover Air Force guys, put them together with all the spare parts and kept us flying every day for years. They kept those airplanes flying. And the Soviets built them as throwaways, like 200 hours, throw the engine away. And we couldn't do that. We had to just keep using them. The bad part was the cockpit came down right above my knees because I'm 6'3", and they were built for little 5'8" guys and back in the 50s. I knew, and the other tall guys in the squadron knew, if you had to eject, you were going to lose your leg right above your knee in both aircraft. So especially the 17. So I kind of knew every time I flew, I wasn't going to eject.
So how long did you do that part of the Top Gun job, the MiG flying part?
I did that for probably 13, 14 months at Top Gun. And that's when I was there for over 2 years. And that's when Constant Peg started up.
Okay.
And it was just perfect to go. Well, you're already qualled. We got Air Force aggressors that are going to transition. Why don't the Navy send you over here? So the Navy said, yeah, good idea. Let's do that. So I went to Nellis and lived in Las Vegas for 2 years and did what I was doing with the Top Gun class with everyone, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Red Flag, you name it. We flew MiGs against them. And the exposures were really important because that's really an old airplane, and we're fighting much more modern airplanes. But the first couple times, the first couple fights, our guys don't do that good. And you could tell right away, anybody that's ever fought, the first thing that happens is the lift vector comes off you, and you realize, okay, you either lost sight or you lost SA. And the next thing that happens is the G comes off. When we would hit the merge for the first time, I could tell the pilots would go by and they were in this holy shit mode. And it was like, wow, that's a MiG. And you'd see, instead of a 6-7G turn, you'd see this 4G turn as they're, oh my God.
They're rubbernecking.
Yeah. They've got this gee whiz factor going on, buck fever sort of thing. And,
well, I remember that, right? So I did constant peg during my first Fallon. And there is that, like, oh my God, that's actually, in my case, an F7, a Chinese version of the MiG-21, or the second sortie was against a MiG-23.
Right.
And so there is that, like, I can't believe that it's surreal, right?
It was surreal for a lot of them, and that's why we had to do more than one sortie each.
Right.
Because the first engagement or two, they just kept looking at you until you got behind them and shot them. Then you go back and brief and remind them about where you're strong, where the MiG is weak, and how to exploit that. And then they can go out and kick your ass if they do everything right. And that is really rewarding, to send people back home knowing that they can beat the enemy.
So let me make sure I get the chronology right here. So at the end of your Top Gun / constant peg shore duty, you transitioned to the F-14. Is that correct?
Yeah, after 2 years at Nellis, I get orders to Fleet Squadron, VF1, Department Head Tour. So I need to transition to the F-14, which ironically, now I've got 3,000 hours of fighter time and lots of fighter time against the F-14, but never flew it.
Okay.
Flew the F-15, flew the F-18, flew a bunch of other airplanes, but I had never flown the F-14.
So you go through VF-124, this squadron, the West Coast Replacement Training Squadron, and but you're on your way to go be a department head, but you did a Cat 1 syllabus, or did you do a quickie syllabus, because normally if you're a previous Tomcat guy, you'll do a Cat 2 or Cat 3 syllabus, which is shorter than the first time syllabus. So did you do a full up Cat 1 syllabus on your way to go be a department head?
No, they gave me some shortcuts.
Because you'd flown buku hours in all kinds of airplanes, and it was kind of second nature to you.
Right, yeah.
Just tell me what I need to do, and then you would be able to do it.
Right. The F-14 and I got along really well. I sat in there and I was home.
What were your first impressions of the F-14 versus the F-4?
For one thing, you had a radar that can really do something. And you had Phoenix missiles, which of course the F-4 didn't have. The F-4 is extremely difficult to do a rate fight. You almost have to do an energy fight or stay two-circle and get face shots, because the F-4, as you know, is just not a good turner. When I went to Germany to teach the Top Gun syllabus, they had F-4Fs, leading-edge slats. I could fight that thing like I would fight an F-5. That thing had some rate, and that could turn, and it was lighter, and they flew it clean. And so I had a month of fighting an F-4F every single day, and then my next stop I'd get in a Dutch F-5 and be the bogey and fly against the Richthofen wing. The F-4J is not in that category, not a good turner. So the first thing you realize is I can do a 250 knot loop in the F-14. I can do all sorts of things with the F-14 that I couldn't do in the F-4.
Much better nose authority.
Much better nose authority, a lot better G at slower speeds, landing at slower speeds.
So you go to VF1 as a department head, and during the course of that tour, you take what is now a very famous picture. So describe how you got that shot, and then what happened after that was published.
So,
well, let's go back. So you had some photojournalism training at Mizzou, or where did you come up with your photojournalist chops?
Right.
It's more than a hobby.
And more than a hobby. I was actually a pro photographer, And Mizzou is a really good journalism school. They have their own TV station, radio station, newspaper. It's the town newspaper. It's not just some college newspaper. Ironically, I couldn't type fast enough to get through the first reporting class, so I took Press Photography 1 only to fill up my schedule. And once I put that film in the developer and pulled it out in the dark room and looked at it and then put it in the enlarger, put the print, took the paper out, stuck it in the deck doll, and there was my first image that I shot with a camera. I mean, I was...
See, kids these days don't know anything about what you just talked about.
Man, yeah, it's all...
Stop bath.
Oh, my goodness.
All this stuff.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So the next 2 years, it was all about journalism with my major in photojournalism.
So, fast forward, here we are. You're leading a fingertip or maybe more. How many airplanes were in that formation on that day?
We had 4,
okay.
two sections, and even back in '74, I never went anywhere. I was so used to being a journalist, and in the summers I'd work for UPI or AP, and I had pictures going national all the time. So I always had my Nikon at the end of my fingertips wherever I went, including in that very helmet bag right there. And I would just stick the helmet bag in the map case and go flying, F4, F-14. Most sorties, you just don't have the time to be able to do it. So you see a million good shots for every shot you get to take. You're not able to do it. But we were coming back toward the ship, and everybody was joining up and getting a little closer. And I thought, wow, here's an island in the South China Sea, and look at these clouds. Aren't they the perfect background? And so I just took my Nikon and went as far back, and I'm just in the mirror and looking at the camera and trying to see if I'm aiming at ducks, my Rio, and getting him centered. And I reach back and go click. I got 3 pictures, and one of them was perfect for me. I mean, it was just perfect. So that photo ends up in a story about one of my wingmen. My wingman was there, Yogi and Possum. And in California Magazine, Ehud Yone wrote this whole article. He flew with them and did everything with the Top Gun crew. And he wrote this story, but they needed a photo for the double spread start in California Magazine. And they used that one. So the producers of Footloose, Jerry Bruckheimer, Don Simpson, 2 young hotshot producers, they're in the dentist's office because Don Simpson has a toothache. And they do everything together so they could save time. Buy cars together, take meetings together, go to the dentist together, shop for jeans together. They see the picture, and as Don and Jerry told me, Jerry looked at it and he flopped it on Don's lap right next to him and said, "That looks like Star Wars on Earth. That's our next movie." And Don agreed, and they went full bore after that. That was '83. So they were doing that for 2 more years before I even had a clue there was going to be a movie about Top Gun.
At what point did they reach out to you? And when did Tony Scott get involved? Because the photo credit was in the magazine, right? That
right.
You got the photo credit. So
right.
They knew that, you had taken that shot, and somehow they reached out to you.
Yeah, nobody bothered to put that together. So what happened was, months before shooting start, Tony brought a crew, and they were looking for places they could shoot. So they go to the O Club, and they go to Top Gun, and they go to various hangars, and everywhere they see photos hanging. They're actually Cibachromes, another throwback, direct print off a slide.
Okay.
Beautiful paper, metallic looking. So all these Cibachromes they're looking at on the wall, they say, "Who shot that? Does anybody know?" "Oh, Heater. I'm in my office, OPSO at 124, right? Tony Scott comes in, never met him before, didn't know who he was. And he's got an entourage. And this was back before you got used to body piercings and pink and purple hair, and that's what the entourage looked like. They were all dressed like that. So I'm like, what's going on here? And the next thing I know, Tony pulls out a wad of bills, and he starts unfurling those, and he goes, "How much do those pictures cost in the O Club? We hear those are all your photos." And I have to go, "Tony, put that away. I'm on active duty. You want to get me or anyone else in trouble, don't ever flash any money." And I said, "I'll give you the slides. You can have all the pictures you want." And he goes, "I'll be at your house at 7 o'clock. And I said, "Okay." And he points to somebody with purple hair and says, "Get his address." So I call my wife and say, "Hey, I got Tony Scott, apparently some kind of director. They're doing a movie about fighter pilots." I didn't even know it was Top Gun.
Well, was it Top Gun yet, or did it have a name? Was there a screenplay? It was just an idea still, right? Star Wars on Earth.
No, they knew it. In fact, Pete Pettigrew had to fight for 2 years to get him to not call the movie Top Guns with an S.
Okay.
Because in the article, the headline was Top Guns, because they were referring to Yogi and Possum.
Okay.
It wasn't about the Top Gun school.
It was about them.
But it got in their heads, and they couldn't get rid of it.
And Pete Pettigrew, the Vietnam-era ace that was the technical advisor.
He was the technical advisor, and thank goodness he fought him for 2 years and got him to take it off and explain that we're talking about the school.
So part B here, just to cut to the chase, is you wind up being one of the 6 extras. So how did that happen?
So I'm just going about my business, and another one with punk rock look, so you could tell they were from the movie, shows up with a Polaroid and says, "Wait a second, I need your photo." And I said, "What for?" "Well, we're doing a fighter pilot movie, and we need some fighter pilot extras." And I said, "I'm the opso of the rag, I'm too busy." She said, "Well, let me take a picture anyway." And she took it, and apparently it went through a vetting process, and they picked me. And they said, "You're going to be an extra." What they didn't know is I was on leave in Missouri with my wife at her parents' place. And I got the call, and they said, "Hey, we're shooting. You're on the call sheet. Where are you?" And I said, "I'm in Missouri on leave." And they said, "Well, you get here. We've already started. We're doing the classroom scene." I had to fly from Missouri right away back to Miramar if I wanted to do it. Left my wife and kids with the in-laws. Used my next 2 weeks of leave to shoot the movie.
Are you now not the OPSO anymore? They sort of make you TAD to Paramount Pictures, or how did that work professionally?
They kind of wanted me after I did the 2 weeks of leave stuff, because I ended up getting in a lot of scenes. And so that for continuity, they wanted me. And I said, "Well, I'm off leave now, and I'm the OPSO of the rag." And they said, "Well, we'll make you a deal. Instead of standing around all day waiting for the shot, we'll tell you when they're ready to shoot. And if you're available, you can be there." So for the next 4 months, it was kind of like that.
Okay.
They would give me a time. At the last minute, they would call me up and say, "If you get free, we can use you now." So I just had a schedule where I didn't fly any less. I didn't work any less. I just used the extra time to be on the film. And some of it was after hours, so it wouldn't have interfered anyway. But I could do it while I was still at the rag.
So we hear stories from guys who were at Top Gun at the time about their concern with the accuracy of the script. Never mind how it turned out. At the time, did you have any concerns about the way that they were representing Top Gun or naval aviation or anything else as they were shooting the movie?
I didn't have any concern, but that's because Tony and I sat down and talked about it for a couple days. He even showed me a couple scripts. He told me he wanted a movie that was like MTV rock and roll fighter pilots. He said, "This movie, you're never going to see the same point of view from the camera more than 3-4 seconds, sometimes even 2. It's going to be boom, 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 just like MTV." When Tony came over to my house that night. He was there at 7 o'clock, just like he said. We sat down in the living room after we talked about motorcycles, cars, and he's talking about The Hunger. The Hunger was a vampire movie that Tony made, and it had Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie in it. He told me to get a VHS tape and take a look at it, because that was the look and feel he wanted for Top Gun. He said, I want this to be high testosterone, tension in the bowels of the carrier, dark, moody, like the movie Hunger, which was mainly blue and black silhouettes. That scared me. If the script was going to be dark and moody and in the bowels of the carrier, I knew I didn't even want to be involved in it. So we go upstairs to my light table, and I've got thousands of slides out there. There's blue sky like we have here, white puffy clouds, gorgeous airplanes in the sunshine, and he got the hang of it right away. And he said, I'm going to come back here tomorrow night. I'm going to pick out some slides I need on the walls in the movie, and we'll talk some more. And then the other way I got involved was when they called me up and said, hey, where are you? We're shooting. And I was on leave in Missouri. Walked onto the set, and that's when Tony noticed me, and he goes, Hita! Tom Cruise hears him say it. So he jumps out of the desk in the classroom, runs over, and he goes, you're Heater? I go, yeah. And he shakes my hand, very gracious, introduces himself, and tells me, do you know what Tony's been doing with your photos? I said, no, I have no idea. And he said he blew them up, and every night he holds them up in front of us at rehearsals, and he says, this is the look and feel of our movie. And he's got 20 photos that he blew up, and eventually put a lot of those in the movie, by the way. And so I thought that was pretty cool. But the next guy I meet is Jambo, great Top Gun instructor, super fighter pilot. He was upset about the cowboy hat.
Well, so let's back up, though. So the first scene, because you come from Missouri out, and the first scene that you're shooting is the classroom in the hangar scene.
Right.
So
which is why Jambo's upset. Jambo's saying, Heater, you're the only bro in the movie.
Meaning Top Gun.
I'm the only Top Gun instructor in the movie. I got to stand up and fight.
Because everybody else is just students, rag students, waiting to do the next phase or something.
Yeah, and Viper had already been battling for 2 years on all sorts of things.
We're talking about the real Viper, not Viper in the movie.
Sorry, Pete Pettigrew.
Yeah, Pete Pettigrew.
So Pete Pettigrew is like, no, we can't have that many ramp strikes. We can't have that many mid-airs. We can't have Maverick dating enlisted dancers at the O Club, which was in the script.
And he has a cameo. He's the
big
civilian guy.
Yeah.
That older guy, right? He plays the older guy at the O Club that Maverick warns Charlie not to get involved with.
Right.
That's Pete Pettigrew.
Right. Back to Jambo, and he's upset that it's not professional. And we've already talked about how Top Gun has to protect the reputation because we're always seeking perfection. So how can you have perfection if everybody's out of bounds, doing all these crazy things and acting like idiots and wearing cowboy hats? So I explained to Jambo that Barry Tubb was a rodeo star, national champion, I think. And he was doing rodeo long before he ever tried acting. And I think he got out of acting and back into rodeo after Top Gun, as a matter of fact. So Barry Tubbs has a hat on there, and I explained to Jambo and a number of other bros, this is visual. Movies are a visual medium. We can't have a sterilized classroom with 20 guys all in khakis looking exactly the same and no visual references. Like now you can tie Wolfman to the cowboy hat and other people to other things. And that's what Tony has to do, make everything visual, keep it interesting. It's one of the reasons he wanted only 2, 3, 4 second shots before the camera angle changed, to keep it visually interesting and stimulating. I tried to explain from a photographer's point of view why we needed to do that and why it was okay for Tony to make a movie that'll be successful rather than a documentary that no one would see. They kind of got that reluctantly, but it wasn't until after the real success of the movie and everybody liked it that they came around and said, okay, we can deal with the downside. The upside's pretty good.
So I remember my first dealings with Top Gun, the real Top Gun, was the summer of 1985. I was in VF-32. It was our first FARP, Fleet Fighter Air Readiness Program at Oceana. So it was Hollywood Dishart, Jaws Winnefeld, later vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who's been on the channel before, and Bio, who's also been on the channel before. They were saying, hey, we're shooting this movie. It's called Top Gun. So this is the summer of 85. And they said, the director came to us and wanted to know if this was accurate, and we saw this one thing where the guy was wearing a cowboy hat in the hangar during a brief, and we said, you wouldn't brief in the hangar and that guy wouldn't be wearing a cowboy hat. And so they said, and so he's going to change it. Obviously, that's not what happened. But to your point, I think ultimately when we saw how wildly popular the movie was, and then subsequently the O clubs at Oceana and Miramar were just jam-packed on Wednesdays and Friday nights.
Right.
And suddenly what we did for a living was in the pop consciousness, let's say. I think we kind of all got over wherever the details went astray. Because as you mentioned, Top Gun prided itself on no ribbons, just a name tag, your wings, you sanitize, no rings, no watches. Right? How boring would that be?
Yeah,
right?
The opposite of visually stimulating.
And Tony Scott famously said when he heard about this criticism, maybe from you, he said, I don't make movies for fighter pilots, I make movies for moviegoers. Right. And the proof is in the pudding in terms of how successful both of the Top Gun movies have been. So how long did you do that? Was that because as you've already described, you were doing sort of this, Alert 5 as OPSO of the RAG, and they're like, hey, we need to shoot something so close in, wasn't that hard to go over to the hangar and shoot a scene and come back. So how long were you doing that?
We did 4 total months. A lot of it was in that first 2 weeks when I came in off leave. We did the bar scene, the classroom scene, a number of other Miramar scenes that took a lot of shooting all day long. Like that bar scene and the singing, that was 2 days at the Roxy, filming it over and over and over again.
That's not the O Club at Miramar?
No, the O Club at Miramar, the ceiling was too low.
Okay.
But, he put my photo of VF1 going into the break section, and right there.
It's backlit, it looks really cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool to see. And then Tony, in order to show time, he himself, not the continuity editor or anyone else, he would come up and put another beer bottle in front of me as the time went on. And so when Charlie went to the bathroom and Maverick followed her, he ended up putting a bunch more beer bottles in there. And even then, I said, Tony, they're only going to be gone for a few minutes. How am I going to have 8 beers in front of me? And that's when he gave me that look like, you do your fighter shit, and I'll do my movie stuff. And so I knew better than to say anything. It was a good 2 days. I got a lot of conversation in with Kelly, sitting this close to her for 2 days. And then the other thing I learned is actors take everything seriously because they don't know which edit will be in the movie. So after you sing that song 2 or 3 times, you're really bored as an extra, and it's like you kind of half-heartedly go through it, and then when you do it 20 times, it's like, don't you have it yet? But they do it, and this is with everything, not just the bar scene. The actors are, when they say action, it's like their very first time. They put all their energy into it because that might be the cut that ends up in the movie, and they want to look good. And some of us extras weren't that good, and so my singing scene is very embarrassing because I was at the 20th time sort of mentality, and I was done with it. But it's there for me to be embarrassed forever.
And then you are very prominent in the Top Gun graduation scene. You're looming over Maverick as he's considering the fact he just got orders, and you give him kind of a look. I know you didn't intend to say, "You're an actor, I'm the real deal," but that's kind of what it comes off as. I know that wasn't your intent.
They did one take, and all he said was, "Hater, get behind Tom." And I just got behind Tom, and I think they read the orders, and so I had to muster my approval, like, "Oh, those are pretty good orders," with just the look.
Flying job. You could be a shooter. It could be worse. Right?
Yeah. So that's all I did. I just stood there and tried to act naturally, and it ended up in the movie. And I'm shocked because, as I just said, we did at least 20 takes of the singing and the bar scene. That was one take.
You're in the latest Top Gun movie, Top Gun Maverick, in a kind of a passing way.
Yeah.
On the bulletin board, there's the picture of the Top Gun class, and you're in that picture, which is the actors and all the real naval aviators, including one Top Gun guy, you. So that's kind of cool that you're actually in the new movie.
Yeah, I never thought I was. I couldn't wait to see the movie. I love the movie. Two things I saw in the movie, I went, "Oh, I'm involved after all." The F-14 missile shoot in the middle of the fight. I had shot that in 1985. So that was on the cutting room floor, and they took it out and used it. Obviously, they didn't have an F-14 fire a missile. It had been long retired. And I recognized the shot.
Well, but to explain further, Tony Scott sent you flying with a Panavision camera,
right,
originally in 1980 whatever.
Oh yeah,
because you were a Missile X observer, so you shot those missile shots you see in the original movie. You took that footage.
Almost everything that was over water, the fighting and the landing and the missile shoots, I shot with a big Aeroflex camera, reel to reel. And interestingly, the film, because of the altitude and the dryness in the cockpit, kept breaking. And they didn't warn me about that. So I opened the camera, and we all know from the Rollums in the old days what film does through a movie projector with two reels. So I'm looking at that going, "Oh my God, how do I fix this?" So I peel off a little bit of reflective tape, and I splice the film together, put it back in the sprockets, close it, shoot a little bit, and then I'm ready to go. It's working. I can see the ticker going and everything. And so from that point on, I had at least 8 sorties, some 2 TA-4, 6 F-14 in the back seat of Bozo, also in the back seat of Sklenka.
So Bozo Abel is the guy who did the aileron roll off the cat shot, which is quite a trick in the F-14 to make that carrier stay in the field of view. Yeah,
I was in his back seat when he did that. I flew at least 8 film missions aerial, and got a credit as an aerial cinematographer.
Well, you also stayed in touch with Tony Scott for years after the movie.
Years after. He had me to the set of some movies. He had me, he said, "I need your flight suit and your boots and your gloves." And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Kevin Costner, I'm going to put a little scene in the beginning of this movie called Revenge where he's flying. And I just need to borrow him for a day." And I said, "All right." I gave it to him, and apparently Kevin Costner wore it in the movie Revenge. And he had me up there for a couple other things. We stayed in touch. And as he approached Top Gun 2 that he was working on, we started talking a lot more. And unfortunately, he had a lot of things in his life go a different way. And he just got out of his car one day, walked to the edge of the bridge, and jumped off the bridge.
Tragic end to a kind of incredible life. So, movie's over. You're the ops of the rag still in, and you fleet up to be the XO of the rag. And at that point, you find out that you've screened for command of a Tomcat squadron, VF-21. So talk to us about that tour, including how you did some sort of pre-Desert Storm ops that maybe set the landscape for what they would do once the shooting started.
I screened Go to Be XO of the Freelancers. We're getting ready to go on cruise, and Saddam gets frisky, and they rush us over to the Gulf to be the first weapon system platforms there to keep Saddam from going into Saudi Arabia. He already went into Kuwait. Here's how the missions work. You take off in the IO, top off overhead on the tanker, fly a long way to the UAE, cutting across Oman and everywhere else, and tank off of 135, go into the Persian Gulf near Kuwait, tank off of Marine 130, and then play patty cake with MiGs and Mirages that were over Kuwait. And we couldn't shoot them down unless they were feet wet. They had to splash feet wet. So we would play this game on the radar where we'd try to draw them out, turn around fast enough to shoot them so they'd splash in the water. And they always knew, and they had good GCI, and they could always get back over land. And when they turned, they were out of the envelope anyway. So we'd go back and forth for a couple, 3 hours and hit the tanker every now and then to stay topped off because we never knew when they were going to come out. And then go back the same way. Over UAE, get a lot more gas than back to the ship. And the missions for a fighter guy, unheard of. 7.5, 8.5 hour missions. And we did that for quite a while until the skipper of my sister squadron came back and had a taxi one-wire landing. He was a great pilot, test pilot. So when he said, look, 8.5 hours is too much to come back and try to do a night landing, then that was gospel. So they ended up cutting out a lot of the tanking and got the flights down to 4 or 5 hours for the rest of the time there.
But still, that had been unheard of, right? We're thinking a 1 + 45 is a long evolution, and now you guys were the first to do 5, 6, 8 hour missions, which became ops normal for pretty much everything we did, including Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom from that point forward. So you guys kind of did some trailblazing there. So the other thing besides Top Gun and your time at Constant Peg and your other operational tours that you're known for, in fact, maybe in some circles this is what you're best known for, is your photo book, The Cutting Edge, which was on every coffee table throughout any fans of military aviation in the 80s and beyond. How did that come together?
The publishers had a real successful Air Force coffee table book. So they were out scouting, just like we talked about with Tony and his crew. And they went to Miramar and saw the same things Tony Scott did. Every picture they saw was mine. I had a huge display in the O Club, huge Cibachromes. They found out that I took all the pictures, arranged to come to my house. The guys looking at the same light table that eventually Tony Scott would come and look at my slides. And I remember him calling up his publisher all excited and said, "We got a book. He's got a book right here. I'm looking at a book. We don't have to shoot another shot. There's a book right here." So they were so happy they could follow up their successful Air Force book with a Navy book. It was finished before Top Gun came out, so it was published. And then that year it made the cover of USA Today as the #1 Christmas gift to give. Eventually the publishers told me, as far as they know, is the #1 coffee table book of all time.
It's a testament to your eye as a photojournalist and your eye as a fighter pilot. So you combine those two things and you got a timeless classic. The book is out of print, but you can get it at aftermarket places like eBay and even Amazon. So just Google The Cutting Edge and you might be able to find a copy, and I highly recommend it. So Heater, it took us a while to get this thing done, but we did it. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for your lifetime of service as one of the iconic fighter guys.
Well, thank you, Mooch. It was an honor to be here with you guys, and Really appreciate it.
So that'll do it for this episode. If you're not already a subscriber, become one so you don't miss anything. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider using the super thanks, the heart icon below, or become a patron at patreon.com/WardCarroll. In the meantime, from the shadow of a VF-124 Tomcat, I look forward to talking to you again very soon.